My name is Ilbra Elie, and I'm a board member at Cloud Security Alliance LA chapter. We are pleased to have Baljit Malhotra as our guest speaker for today's talk on improving cloud security through API governance. Mr. Baljit is the founder and CEO of TJABS, which is solving critical problems in the API risk management space. Prior to founding TJAB 3 years ago, Mr. Baljit was the head of R&D at Black Duck Software and an executive at SAP prior to that. He holds a PhD in computer science and has worked extensively on open source software and API throughout his career. I will go ahead and turn this presentation over to him. But just as a side note, if anyone has a question, please go ahead and enter your questions in the chat towards the end of the presentation. I will read the question and Mr. Baljit will answer the questions. Please help me welcome Mr. Baljit Malhotra.
Thank you very much for the intro. Just a quick check, my audio is fine?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. So thank you for the introduction again. I'm the founder and CEO of TJLab. TJLab is an API management company focused on risk and security management. Before stint with TJLab, I was at Black Duck, SAP, and with academia looking into cybersecurity data management problems. This is the high-level agenda of this presentation. I would share some of the key trends that are shaping up today's cloud-driven economy. In particular, I will share some results published by Gartner and also some of the results that are driven by my team. And in general, they represent trends in the cloud space, software, or in general in APIs. For the next 15 minutes or so, then I will talk about key considerations of API governance. When we talk about cloud, inherently APIs are part of that ecosystem. I'll talk about in API governance, why ownership, onboarding of APIs, assignment of APIs, and monitoring of APIs is critical for the cloud security for enterprises. At the end, for 5 minutes, I'll keep a Q&A. Feel free to type in your questions using the Q&A button. We'll be happy to answer those questions live or later. So let me share the very first trend, which is about the investment that is happening in the cloud space. If you look at these numbers are published by Gartner. In the last year itself, there is a $250 billion investment into different cloud technologies. Either they are business processes, or they are application infrastructure, or IPaaS as we call them, or these are applications, native cloud applications, or these are software or cloud security solutions or infrastructure related solutions. And the point is, cloud is growing. That's the message here. If you look at some of the software related trends, there are millions of software applications that are available. And many of these software applications are because of open source movement. The graph that you're seeing right now represents in the next decade or so, we are talking about 500 million different software applications that will be publicly available. But there will be some issues in this open source driven economy where software is becoming publicly available. There will be certain implications from cloud security perspective that I will share a bit later. If you look at the combination of these two things, you know, in the earlier 2 decades or so, you know, the websites were increasing. And in the last decade or so, we see another trend where APIs, or you know, you call them web services as well, but essentially what I mean by that is APIs that are that are available through the internet for various technological or business reasons. The simplest example I can give you is Google Maps API, LinkedIn APIs, but this way, pretty much every company on the planet is connecting their cloud systems or applications through these APIs. And APIs are seeing the same journey that we saw for websites back 20 years or so. If you compare these two trends, what we found is there is almost a trend where APIs are actually eating the software world. The figure on the very left-hand side, it is a research that is done by my team, where we found that how different cloud native or software applications, they are providing different API integrations. And many of these software applications that we're talking about, which is represented on the graph on the left-hand side, they were publicly available on GitHub. To be very precise, we scanned roughly 2 million open source projects where we wanted to see some empirical evidence that APIs are growing. And that's exactly what we found. It's kind of a war, API war, that is going on between these large enterprise companies or cloud companies. More so, if you look at the growth of Microsoft, which was not traditionally built as a cloud company, but on-prem enterprise company, but they have transited into a cloud company very successfully, and we can see that evidence that as of 2018, we see many APIs in Azure ecosystem. Likewise, Salesforce, Amazon truly a SaaS company. Their entire cloud infrastructure is managed through different API integrations. In summary, if you look at the growth of these APIs, in many ways, I like to call them, they have become basic building blocks of any cloud infrastructure or applications. Their growth, or the rate at which they're increasing, that is even exceeding the rate at which the open source applications grew, and which can be shown by the graph on the right-hand side. This is validated by another peer company, Akamai, which did some analysis on API traffic that was on the internet. It is a mind-boggling to know that 83% of the internet traffic is through APIs. Now, I should give a maybe quick few seconds of pause to let you digest the importance of this number. Now, if so much of traffic is through APIs, you can imagine this truly represents how companies have transited from enterprise companies to SaaS companies, where every service that used to be a software is now actually available through the cloud as a service. Either it's a map application or payment application or other kinds of integrations that these companies enable. We as a company, as an API management company, we are tracking the growth of these APIs as well. And in our systems, this is a research that we published recently for the community, roughly around 50,000 different APIs we could account for that were already available in our systems. We believe 1 million or so APIs exist that we are not able to account for, but these could be APIs that are either behind the cloud firewalls, or they are available, but they are access controlled through different mechanisms, because they could be APIs that are available for partners or customers in a private manner. The point I'm trying to make here is, with all these different trends that I shared with you, the growth of cloud, the growth of software applications, the fact that the internet traffic is accumulating the majority of the traffic that is coming through APIs, tells us a story. And that story is, if as an enterprise organization, as a company, I am pretty much sure every company that is dealing with software systems, either in the cloud or enterprise, they are dealing with APIs. I mean, that's just a no-brainer. However, the rate at which these APIs have grown to connect different cloud systems, it is very difficult for enterprises to answer one question very precisely. Where are all my APIs? Now, there is no shame in saying that enterprises actually do not know all their APIs. In many, many situations, there could be certain exceptions, I must admit that. But in our experience as a company, we have found a lot of enterprises where they cannot simply say that we know all our APIs. Either they are accounted in our marketplaces, or we are accounting them into some static fashion in our repositories, or we are tracking them through gateways and whatnot. But the fact is, today's executive leadership teams, they do not necessarily know all their APIs if they want to account for all their APIs, internal, external, partner APIs, customer APIs, free APIs, public APIs, private APIs. There is a gamut of APIs that you could be dealing with a large enterprise. Now, let me pose a question to the audience here. If I do not even know my APIs, how do I manage security? How do I manage compliance? That becomes practically impossible. And because of that reason, APIs are throwing a big challenge for cloud companies. In this picture, I am showing two very important numbers, which basically puts all the trends that I presented on the earlier slides into one single message. Cloud has grown. 96% of those applications are open source. And many of these applications, inherently, because if they are open, just like it is available to you, they are available to hackers as well. So by nature, they can be exploited. And since many of these applications have transformed into cloud applications, your cloud is not secure by not knowing your API. So simple story. So it is very important for organizations to address these challenges. And part of this challenge is to find or discover all your APIs. If you are not able to account for your APIs, it is practically impossible for you to manage your cloud security challenges. Let me share some real world stories. I should rather not say them stories, but these are real world examples. And these are recent hacks that have happened with large companies like T-Mobile. Even I'm not showing the example of Facebook, but Uber. A lot of companies are unfortunately affected by the breach of their APIs. Whenever you hear a breach, if you dig deeper inside this, if you investigate further, you'll find out there is some API that was compromised. In many cases, there are certain exceptions, but in many cases, these are API-related breaches. Because if you think very carefully, API is a technology that is connecting outer world to your system, or you are connecting your technology to the outer world. So basically, they are a door to your information system. And if this door is not secure, you're looking at data breaches and some of the problems I mentioned. You're looking at SQL injection attacks. You're looking at other kinds of API-specific problems. I will not go into detail, but I'm sure this audience is savvy and they understand some of these risks. Probably they have heard from their security colleagues or other colleagues within their enterprises. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, there are several challenges. Now, let me summarize, going very focused on the API ecosystem that brings these challenges to enterprises. Why these challenges exist in the cloud to begin with. Now, the first problem is, as I mentioned, if you do not have APIs that you can account for, if there are unknown APIs or shadow APIs that are embedded in your software, and you must wonder where these APIs came from, why I'm saying embedded APIs. There are tons of reasons, but one prime reason is, as I mentioned, open source is, the usage of open source has increased. 90% or so applications are built using open source. And I also shared another research that my team did. Many of these open source contain certain APIs because that's how companies are thriving to connect They bring these open source projects, but they have these integrations to connect with different cloud applications or software applications that they build. So inherently, any application you pick from open source, they already have certain API integrations or potential to have those. So if you download a library or your developers download a library from GitHub or other open source repositories for one specific reason, but not necessarily knowing there could be multiple API integrations in those libraries, you have an unknown API ecosystem. The other reasons of unknown APIs could be companies buy companies, they acquire assets, they integrate those assets. It is again practically impossible. The vastness of software systems, which could run into millions and in some cases billions of lines of code, if you put all those pieces together, it is very difficult to manually find all those APIs. So it is a very, very difficult problem. Now, the story does not end there. Knowing API is one thing, but knowing risks that come to the usage of those APIs is another thing. One of the prime reason is, just like with the open source world, there could be terms of services or the agreements that dictate the usage of those APIs. For example, there could be an API that is publicly available. Let's talk the example of Twitter API. It's a publicly available API. Twitter is perhaps one of the best examples, and they pioneered this technology along with eBay or some of the other great companies that have thrived in the API economy space. Now, just because this API is publicly available, freely available, you can access by registering, getting an API key and accessing those APIs, that does not necessarily mean that you don't have obligations. Even if you use that API today with the best of your intention, you may have a commercial agreement in place, that's great to have, but Twitter or other organizations can change these terms of services. Any vendor, as a matter of fact, when you start to use their APIs, they could change these terms of services at any point in the future, and the obligation is onto you to be compliant with those terms of services. Why? Because these terms of services could be beyond their control, because a law may come, GDPR may come, or HIPAA law may come, or other native laws may come, which may force these vendors to dictate the terms that you need to be compliant with to use their APIs. Because at the end of the day, these APIs are nothing but exchanging data between two systems, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is just finding APIs is not good enough. Once you find APIs, you need to find the legal risk, you find the security risk, and that becomes a very difficult problem, as you can imagine, if these are your external APIs, if these are APIs you did not build. However, even if you build your own APIs, that doesn't make your job easier either. The reason is the API ecosystem has grown to become so complex. There could be one business unit having one forms of API. There could be another business unit could have another forms of API. One API team may have a monetization strategy. They want to generate revenue and whatnot. So within a very large enterprise, you could have a complexity around all these different internal APIs. Now, the definition itself could be very confusing. Now, this is an API that is built for me internally to be consumed, but also available for partner over the internet, crisscrossing the different networks. Now, should I treat that as internal API or external API? So the point I'm trying to make here is, even if you build your APIs, the challenges are not easy to solve. So you need to decide centralization of these APIs, who owns these APIs. You need to put version control in place, how to control the accesses, because you could have a variety of different users, paid users, premium users, partner users, free users, and all kinds of situations are there. In this kind of situation, how do you enforce policies? In this kind of situation, how do you govern APIs? So, all these issues come into play once you are talking about your cloud security, once you're talking about API management within the context of cloud security. These are very, very important issues. Now, I talked about the trends. The cloud is growing, the software applications are growing, software companies are becoming services companies. I talked about why managing APIs is important for cloud companies. Now, it will be not kind to point out the problems, but not propose a solution. So here is, at the very high level, to present, what should be done to govern APIs in a typical enterprise. Now, I'm not trying to claim that this is the only way and this is the thesis how every enterprise should govern it, but these are general principles that are, in my opinion, with vast experience from working with different organizations, these are some of the practical attributes that should be considered for API governance in any enterprise. Now, let me go through this one by one very quickly. Visibility. I think I have emphasized enough why visibility is important, why API discovery is important. Because if you do not even know your APIs, and if you do not have the visibility, then everything you can leave aside. You cannot manage security, you cannot manage compliance. So visibility is important. Cost is important from two perspectives. If you have built APIs from monetization perspective, you want to provide a seamless integrations with your customers and partners that are consuming your APIs on monetization basis. However, when you're consuming those APIs as a consumer of APIs, you want to make sure that all the vendors that are billing you for consuming their APIs, you have a way to audit them. It's a matter of cost, right? Because let's say, I'm just giving an example. Let's say each API or a very special API calls you $1 per call. Now, if you have one API, by maybe 10 APIs by 10 vendors, you can still manage it. You can still manually manage these kind of things. But what if I tell you you have 100 vendors, 1,000 different APIs spread across different products and services that are embedded there? How do you audit them? How do you ensure that they are billing you accurately? One way is to go audit those go to their dashboards and basically look into each of their plans and basically govern from there or audit from there. But as you can imagine, this is a very cumbersome problem. So cost, how do you manage your costs? How do you audit your cost is part of your governance practice. You must account for that. Compliance is, of course, I've emphasized enough that, free APIs does not necessarily mean that you don't have obligations. Similarly, there could be laws that dictate you how you should consume this API. So it's not just a matter of technically figuring out how to integrate API, but if these APIs deal with PII, or if these APIs are hosted in a specific region where your data is going back and forth, what are the implications on you as an organization? So how do you meet your obligations? Now, trust is very, very important for any system in the world. So API governance is no exception. And this is important because if these are APIs that you build and your partners and customers depend on them, how do they trust your APIs that there are no, they can depend on it from a security perspective, from compliance perspective, and also from some of the newer problems that we are seeing that are hitting the industry because of a lot of APIs are AI-driven solutions, speech processing or image processing, or even just integrating certain kinds of data intelligence, which are driven by data models. But since you did not build APIs, how do you know there is no biasing in those decisions? So these are all very, very difficult questions to answer, but that should be part of your governance strategy when you're building these programs. So trust is very, very important. Very quickly, so we are coming towards the end of the presentation. I just want to quickly summarize for you to build your API governance program, you need certain things you must consider. How do you centralize your orchestration of different APIs, especially keeping in mind you have all these hybrid different natures of APIs, internal, external, partner, internal to your internal teams, internal to your partners. So all those. How do you orchestrate such a scenario? Discovery and benchmarking, I already mentioned. If you do not know how to discover APIs that were in the part of the system, you must achieve that through different tools and different technologies. Operational legal risks, as I mentioned, many of these things are directly tied to digitization, but some of the things, for example, how do you ensure your existing investment are protected? Because when you bring new technologies, new processes, perhaps you have already invested hundreds and thousands of millions of dollars into different existing API management technologies. So how do you ensure that this entire ecosystem can work and function in a coherent manner. Lifecycle management, again, how do you manage this from end to end, from the time that your API is designed, built, orchestrated? How do you manage all the way to the lifecycle of these APIs? I've already spoken many of these key attributes. This is about how do you implement it? How do you audit it? How do you control it? If you're able to deploy it, how you should be able to collect the analytics that will enable the leadership team, that will enable the developers, that will enable the compliance teams to achieve your objectives from API governance perspective. At the very last, I want to share some of the community resources that is available to this audience. If you and some of these resources are driven by with our open API membership. So I'm sure you are aware of some of the open API community member projects or initiatives that are there. So I encourage you to join those initiatives. This is initiative by us. We encourage you to explore. And in this particular system, you guys can see different aspects of APIs from different industries, from different businesses. What are the security issues? What are the compliance issues behind those APIs? Or at least follow the best practices by using some of these community resources. On these community resources, these are some of the things you should be looking into, where you should be able to look into legal risk management. You should be able to do some of the quality assessment. You should be able to do some of the things that is important from community participation perspective. Because if you as a community member are building certain APIs for your partner ecosystems, even with no monetization consideration, how these communities are evolving. So some of these resources could be useful to this community. Now, let me quickly summarize, and then I will leave maybe a minute or two for Q&A. Cloud security is about securing your APIs as well. Digital companies of today's modern economy are cloud companies. APIs have become currency of this digital economy. There's no doubt about it. And governance of those APIs is key to your cloud risk management. So if you're not managing your APIs properly, you're not managing your cloud properly. API governance, for you to achieve that, the moment you design, the moment you start to build APIs, the moment you need to orchestrate it, you must think about different basic building blocks you need to govern those APIs. How to enforce those policies, which could be impacting your security posture, your legal posture. So at the end of the day, API governance is all about how do you enable access, audit, control, deploy, and analytics so that the leadership team can make more informed decisions. With that note, I would like to thank the audience as well as the organizers. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Baljit. This is my contact information.